Let's get sweaty.
Hey guys, welcome to another Shenmue Dojo video. Today I'm wanting to talk about the Nintendo Switch and whether Shenmue should be on Nintendo Switch. Spoiler alert, yes it should. End of video. No, I'm joking. Right, so it is one of the more interesting discussions in the Shenmue community, I guess. It's been around ever since the re-releases got announced in 2018. There were rumours around that point as well. I'll link some in the comments below. And then in sort of 2019, the dojo got several different tip-offs. I'm not going to go into who around this potentially happening. This was E3 2019 to the point where we had got assets ready for this thing, and then for whatever reason, it just didn't happen, and I don't know why. So the idea of this video is to sort of take a very quick look at why I think it makes sense, some of the potential challenges of this thing, and maybe some sort of other alternatives if you want to play this thing portably, essentially. So why does it make sense to go to Nintendo Switch? Well, simply put, Nintendo Switch has got over 125 million sales as of now. Insane numbers. So that is a humongous audience potentially that could be tapped into. Bear in mind that there's probably a portion of Switch owners out there who have double dipped. So they've bought a Switch and a PlayStation, or a Switch and an Xbox, or whatever, or PC and Switch. Whatever the combination, there are going to be some out there who have bought one console, two consoles, whatever. So take that away for a second and then look at the market for Switch. I forever see sort of classic titles coming over to Switch on the eStore, so it sort of really lines up quite well. I think a lot of gamers that pick up Switch seem to be older gamers from what I've seen. Now that could just be what I've seen. There's no market research behind this. I haven't gone into it in great detail, but a lot of people my age have a Nintendo Switch. Now, whether that's for kids as well, to sort of give them something to play, or it's because they want to play it themselves, they have one of these things. So there is a good portion of a market there, potentially, and like I say, it's not backed up by figures, potentially of a similar age who would want to play Shenmue on this thing. So there's that as well. Sega titles gone over to the Nintendo eStore and have done pretty well. One of the standout ones was Virtua Racing, which is close to an arcade port as you'll get of that game. It was done by M2. Fantastic, and it's a really good port. Then come into affordability with the Nintendo Switch itself. So when you're looking at a Steam Deck, you're probably looking at the basic Steam Deck here of about £360. For the base Nintendo Switch, it's around $280. You can sometimes get them for $250 if you look hard enough. And the OLED model is probably around $300 to $320. So it is cheaper than the Steam Deck. I'm going to talk about Steam Deck slightly at the end of this video. So from an affordability standpoint, potentially, there's that sort of caveat to it. What I would say is, if it does make its way over to Switch, it needs to be backwards compatible with whatever the Switch 2 is going to be, and rumours are this is going to get announced later this year with a release in 2024. Who knows? Nobody knows, but if it's backwards compatible with this thing, assuming that is an option on Switch 2, then yeah, you're essentially printing yourself some money there as well. In terms of like the dynamics of Shenmue and the type of game it is, there are lots of sort of RPG type titles, classic RPG titles on the Switch, and I think Shenmue could complement those quite well in terms of the way it plays. Shenmue 3 would be not a different ask, I guess, but could be a challenge, and that sort of brings me on to the challenges and difficulties around this thing, potentially. The first big one, quite frankly, Sega may not want to do this. They may have the numbers in front of them, and they may go, do you know what? While we can do it, it's not worth our time and investment for what could be a very small profit on this thing. So from a business perspective, they've got a finite amount of resources. They're not going to pool all their resources into something that's not going to make them as much money as something else, which is basic business. They won't do it. It's a shame, but I can see that call being quite difficult to potentially make, I guess. And then there's the technological thing around the Nintendo Switch. I'm going to break this down to sort of Shenmue 1 and 2 and Shenmue 3. Talking to the guys in the modding community for Shenmue 1 and 2, they see no real reason why it couldn't work on the Nintendo Switch, Shenmue 1 and 2 HD. Now, I will sort of caveat this a little bit in that you have to keep in mind that D3T explained that moving the games over from Dreamcast and Xbox to modern platforms was quite a challenge, and they had lots of issues doing this, and this was on more powerful hardware, the PC, PS4 and the Xbox One at the time. So could those issues be a factor on what is essentially a much less powerful console in the Nintendo Switch, and would there be some compromises there? Possibly. Then you come on to Shenmue 3 itself. Now, Shenmue 3 runs on Unreal 4, so from an engine perspective, we know that it's compatible with the Nintendo Switch. So theoretically, it could happen. There might have to be some significant compromises made, given that the Switch runs in docked mode at 1080p and in handheld 720p, so they're going to have to probably make some compromises there. They also have to consider the Switch's CPU is not particularly strong, so if Shenmue 3 is leaning on into sort of CPU-powered processes in terms of the game world or whatever it needs, that could prove an issue, and therefore compromises might have to be made. So again, theoretically possible, but I really don't know, and I'm not a developer, I'm not anybody who works in game architecture. This is just me sort of joining the dots and hoping I'm in the right ballpark. One thing I will say is the Switch cartridges can go up to about 32 gigabytes, and I understand there might be larger capacity ones out there, but they're obviously significantly more expensive if that's the case. So, I mean, 32 gigs, you cover Shenmue 1 and 2 comfortably. You'd easily cover Shenmue 3 as well on something like that, because it downloads at around 25 to 27 gigabyte, if my memory serves me correctly. The next challenge, I guess, is the controls. Now, Shenmue 1, 2 and 3 run on a trigger system. The Nintendo Switch doesn't have them in terms of running and moving, so that would have to be adapted. You'd either basically have to have a run on or off, I guess is probably the way around it. You then have to also consider the lack of a D-pad on the Joy-Cons. Now, if you get a Switch Pro controller, it's got a D-pad on it, and it's quite a good D-pad. It's probably one of the better controllers out there, being quite honest with you. But the Joy-Cons don't have it. And then you've also got to factor in, how could somebody theoretically play that thing in handheld mode, essentially, with one half of those Joy-Cons, so the little, either the red or the blue side. That's not a lot of space to play Shenmue. How would that work, and how could they factor that in? I do not know. That would be an interesting challenge for them to handle. I do think they can get round it, but I don't know how they can get round it. So I can hear lots of people probably shouting at me right now, get a Steam Deck, get a Steam Deck, and there are also other alternatives out there to Steam Deck as well. Steam Deck is fantastic. It's the easiest portable way to play Shenmue 1, 2 and 3, because they're all on the Steam store. It does make a lot of sense, but you have to factor in the affordability of the Steam Deck. It isn't cheap. And then you've got the Republic of Gamers competition, which name eludes me right now, which is even more expensive. So you've got to factor that in, I guess. Now, granted, games on Steam are a lot cheaper than Nintendo Switch games on the whole, so you could probably sort of offset that in terms of the initial cost outlay to then the games, just sort of going out there. There are also other alternatives. I mean, people have emulated this thing on mobile phone before. Again, I mentioned this in a previous video, the control scheme might be challenging, but there are ways out there to play this thing portably, certainly unofficially and officially, just not on Nintendo Switch, where there is, in my view, a massively untapped market. So I don't see, to sort of close this video down, I guess, why they couldn't chuck it on the Switch. Granted, there's some technological challenges there. I'm not aware of those and the intricacies of what all those might be, but I really think they could make some money on this, because most Shenmue fans who have a Switch will probably double dip on this anyway, so why not? The majority of the work in terms of porting to consoles has been done, especially for 1 and 2. So you'd think, yes, they'd have to make some tweaks, but a lot of that work has already been done, so it's not going to need too much further investment to make this happen. Shenmue 3, as I said, there might have to be some compromises around how the game runs, how the game looks, and even if it could potentially run. I do think it probably can, but there we need to look at that work balance in terms of the CPU in the Switch and the GPU in the Switch very, very carefully. I also wonder, and I'm not putting words in people's mouths here, whether this is something like a limited run games or a strictly limited could pick this thing up and do a collector's edition for the Switch, for example, on a limited run of, say, 1,000, 2,000 copies. I don't know. I'm just sort of putting that out there as a potential idea as to how to get this thing over, but then also maybe not like lose a shed load of money on this. I don't know. I'm just spitballing ideas on here. But to close this out, I do think it would be awesome to have Shenmue on the Switch, because you've got a broader audience, and even if it's just the original games guys, I think they would do quite well on there. And like I said, Shenmue 3 could potentially happen as well if they can do the tech side of things. But unfortunately, I think in 2018 Yu Suzuki sort of killed that a little bit and said, look, there were no plans for it, it was unlikely. So unless Deep Silver or whatever they call now change their mind, I can't see it happening. But yeah, to round everything off, should it be on Switch? Yes, absolutely. But what do you guys think? Should Shenmue come over to the Nintendo Switch? Would you buy it? How many copies would you buy? And do you think they'd have to make any particular compromises to get this thing working? Drop some comments below, guys. Give us a like, share, subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You know where you can find us by now. And I'll be back with a video not too far away from now. But for now, guys, take care and have a good one.